a lot of people who feel nostalgic for the ways things used to be here. And I think it would be great if you could address that. And I was like, I know exactly how to address that. And so when I got up,
because you probably did a podcast about it.
I said, well, yeah, I said, look, I want to tell you how your memory works because it's going to challenge the way that you're feeling because I know that you're feeling nostalgic about it. And then I told them this whole thing and people really loved it. Now that is the only reason I had that information was because I was forced to do it for the podcast. So it's an IP factory. And then number two, it's an opportunity magnet. People find the podcast and then they reach out to me with interesting opportunities or just connections. I mean, I've some of the largest venture capitalists in the country like this show, and they reach out to me, and this is just useful contacts, right? Because I make the show. So the show does not make me that much money at all, but it provides these two things. And I always step back and ask, what is this for? What is this for? And maybe at some point the answer is, you know what, this isn't for anything anymore. And then it's time to shut it down. But for now I have the answer. That's why you keep asking the question. My name is Jason Feifer. I'm the editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine and author of the new book, Build for Tomorrow. On Ever Forward Radio today, we are talking about reconsidering the impossible. Those things that you thought were impossible, those ideas that you thought were too difficult or too challenging, those might actually be the ones that are going to help you move forward. We're going to reconsider them today. The 4-day work week is, leaving aside the dream people have of working 4 days a week, I find that subject is actually just a really good way to encapsulate the kind of mass change that we're going through in terms of work. Because it represents so many different things, and also because the way in which the 4-day work week is worked right now will not be the way in which it's worked 5-10 years from now, assuming that it's an idea that lasts. Oh, wow. And that I think is also a really important thing to keep in mind, because when we're going through this period of reinvention, we have to know that so much of what we're experiencing is just a stop along the way. It's not a new reality that we will now be living with forever.
That's a really good point. Before we kind of get into the transition elements of what working life looks like right now, can you give us, paint us the picture of what do you see is happening? What has been the change over the last 2 years in the workforce in terms of how we work, where we work, the productivity level, input versus output? So before we get into the change that's involved, let's really get a baseline understanding if we could.
Sure. Okay. At the beginning of the pandemic, we went through this moment of radical reinvention, which we had to do. I feel like, in fact, we should probably step back and say, here's a thing that we all do all the time, which is that we build a little fence around ourselves and we say the good and realistic ideas are inside. Right? We're going to take the window of everything available. We're going to take the good things and the things that make us work and make the things that we do work. And those are inside, and everything outside, bad, impossible, too difficult, too upsetting, whatever the case is. And when the pandemic came along, I think one of the most valuable things that it did a lot of terrible things, but one of the most valuable things that it did is that it forced all of us to exit that little fence that we had built, because the things that we had inside didn't work anymore. And therefore we were forced to look outside, right? I called around. I was trying to understand why a moment of massive disruption can lead to such reinvention. I talked to this guy. His name is Brian Berkey. He is a business studies and legal ethics professor at Wharton. And he said, a moment of crisis forces us to shift the window on what we're willing to collectively take seriously. It's perfect.
So true, yeah.
And so here we have this moment where we're pushed outside and we are forced to say, you know what, some of these things that we had left outside of our barrier are actually pretty good and necessary. And they're the things that push us forward. And that, I think, is what we experienced in so many ways, but we're talking right now about work. That's what we experienced with work, where we said, oh my God, there are other ways to work. Why have I been doing it this one way the whole time?
Yeah. Whether by choice or by force.
Yeah. You feel cheated, right? You feel like, all this time, I could have been working in a better way. This time has been taken away from me. And then people feel like they need to catch up.
Exactly. Yeah, like something's owed.
Yeah.
Something owed to me. Like I owe it to myself now to make up for this time that I could have been doing everything else.
Which I think explains the Great Resignation.
Yeah.
Right? Or I don't really like that phrase, the Great Resignation. I would go with the Great Reconsideration because that's what people did. They stepped back and they reconsidered. And they said, this is what I need now. And I haven't had it for so long that I will not wait another moment. I need it. And if you're not going to deliver it to me, then I will go find a way to get it myself. And so people left or they demanded change. And so this, I think, leads us to the 4-day work week, because one of the things that happened was people took a look at what not just the company thought it needed, but what the people who worked there needed. And if you start to think, well, is there a way that we can both get what we need? Then you start to open yourself up to totally different ways of thinking, totally different ways of structuring your workday. And so these companies, there are a lot of them, have started to say, well, what about the 4-day work week? There have been some interesting experiments that took place, right? The most famous one is in Microsoft in Japan, where they moved down to a 4-day work week. So just to be clear, in case this is not like a familiar concept, literally took a day away from the work week. 5 days a week, 4 days a week. And productivity did not drop. Productivity did not drop. So then you got to ask yourself, okay, how did that happen? And the answer is that it wasn't just a matter of taking a work day away. It was a matter of rethinking how you're spending every moment of all the days. How much time are you wasting in meetings that simply don't need to happen? How many meetings can be an email? The answer is so many meetings can be an email. And so once we start to restructure that and we start to change the way, for example, that companies expect things of their employees, right? You start to shift, for example, are we measuring input or are we measuring output? Are we measuring the time that people put into the work or are we measuring what they do? Because once you shift, once you stop being so concerned with how much time people are spending working and instead just focus on what did they produce, then you can start to create all sorts of flexibilities in the way in which people work together. And so you have this option now to rethink, well, how many days or how much time should people be working? Now, here's the super interesting thing. So a lot of companies have been doing this now. And what they're finding is that people love it. It's not easy. It requires a lot of creative thinking. It requires a lot of experimentation. You have to restructure not just your schedule, but often your management structure and the expectations and the pace of work. But once you get there, people love it. And then about a year later, they're going to tell you something. They're going to tell you that they start to feel a little disconnected from their colleagues. Yeah. Because those meetings that we thought were unnecessary served another purpose, and that was connection. And now the question is, well, what do you do? And I think, and the folks I've talked to, for this I heard this from a tech company called Buffer. They went through exactly this. They instituted a 4-day work week. Originally, it was a little bit of an experiment, and then it expanded. It became the standard in which they were working. And then a year later, people started to say, I feel disconnected from my colleagues. And so now the company is stepping back and thinking not, well, we have to get rid of this. And instead they're thinking, well, okay, how do we fix that problem? And that, I think, is the right way to think. Because whenever we face a problem, and we're facing so many of them, there's so many changes that we're experiencing, that we need to ask ourselves, not, is this perfect? It's never perfect. But rather, is this problem better than our previous problem?
Is the new problem better than the one we had in the beginning, whether it was, again, by force or by choice?
And that's
a very fair evaluation.
Very fair evaluation, because that's the evaluation that can help you move forward, right? If everything that you do is judged whether or not it is perfect, well, the answer is you will never do a new thing because every new thing is going to be imperfect.
So true. Yeah.
And so instead, is the new problem better than the old problem? The answer is yes. People are happier. They're more satisfied. But the problem is that they feel disconnected. Okay, that's fine. That's a problem. It's worth taking seriously, but it's better than the old problem.
Yeah. Yeah. It's almost like if we look at problem solving, if we look at, in business, if we're working for somebody else or ourselves, instead of going all in and trying to just, hey, there's a problem, I need to just obliterate the problem so that the problem goes away.
Right.
But rather, what if I just did things differently so that that problem becomes less? What if it becomes less frequent? What if it becomes less of a burden financially, whether it's overhead, personnel, whatever, insert your marker for success here or marker, whatever you're measuring.
Right.
I mean, I think that in and of itself completely changes your mindset on how you do everything professionally. You become less laser focused, which there's a time and a place, but instead of all I'm doing right now, me, my team, subordinates, peers, superiors, if we're only looking at trying to just annihilate this problem, you've got blinders on, you're missing a lot of other opportunities.
Yes, that's totally right. And you're also setting the wrong expectations. I think that something that I think confuses people and drives a lot of fear of change is that people feel like the new must wholesale replace the old.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
And Model 2.0 has got to completely get rid of 1.0.
Right.
It's got to be way better.
That's right. It is reinforced in the way in which new things are written about in media. And I don't mean to be like bash media guy. I literally work in traditional media, but when Substack comes out, you have a million stories that are all basically like, is Substack going to replace traditional media? No, guys, that's not what's going to happen. Instead, what's going to happen is that we're going to take the best of the old and we're going to take the best of the new and we're going to combine them into something else. And that is what I'm seeing now in the way in which we work. So we had a way in which we worked before the pandemic, and then the pandemic threw everything up into the air, and now some things are starting to land. We're running some kind of experiments. Does this mean because the 4-day work week is a interesting experiment run by a bunch of companies that it's the way that everyone will work forever? No, that's ridiculous. That's not what it means. Instead, what it means is that this is one new way of thinking about work. We're going to run it. We're going to see what happens. We're going to discover some challenges. Like, for example, people feel disconnected. We're going to try to address those. When we do, we will create yet another problem. We'll try to address those. And what we will end up with is something that doesn't look like what we had before and doesn't look like what we have now, but is instead some combination of them plus new ideas that's going to take us forward even more.
Is there a way to kind of make sure, or at least give us a fighting chance, that we can have that on a regular basis? And instead of waiting for another pandemic or waiting for another monstrosity type of event to force us to have to change how we work, our markers for success, everything we've been talking about, but rather, all right, let's problem solve. Let's look for less big problems, so to speak. But then also along that way, is there a sub team we need to have, or what maybe things can we put in place, especially if we're an entrepreneur, so that we're problem solving and problem diminishing, but also not getting so bogged down in the weeds that we can step out a little bit and look objectively at that, so that it's just like one hand feeds the other.
Yeah. So let me take it big, and then we'll go down to the individual. So big. HBR, Harvard Business Review, ran this piece a number of years ago that I really loved. The question that it tried to answer was, why do big companies stop innovating? And the answer that was offered, which I just found very compelling, was that at the very beginning of a company's life cycle, it builds upon some new idea, some innovations. It's very basic, right? Yeah. What do people need that is not being provided to them that we can introduce?
A better product or a better way to get it.
Exactly.
Cheaper, better value.
And then once they do that and they have success with it, quite naturally, over time, these companies shift from thinking about innovation to thinking about efficiency. And everybody at the organization, top to bottom, becomes incentivized towards efficiency, becomes how do we do the thing that we're already doing, but faster, better, and cheaper. And that's fine for a while. It enables you to compete against the competitors that you've identified, right? Because
lower overhead,
exactly,
increased profit margins, all that.
If I am a camera film company, then the thing that I want to make sure is that I'm selling better camera film for a cheaper cost than my competitors. That's what keeps me ahead. And for that reason, that structure of efficiency works really well for a while until somebody comes along and completely disrupts you. And then you are not built to react to it, because you're only built to compete in one way. Which is why, for example, I mean, you use the example of camera film, right? So we know the story of Kodak, of course, right? This is an old story. In fact, Kodak had developed the digital camera and then basically put it on a shelf and didn't do anything with it, right? But here's a fascinating way to think about Kodak. You know what killed Kodak? It wasn't. This is an argument that I had heard from a disruption expert named Hamza Mudassir. So he told me that the Kodak was seeing Kodak. The story of Kodak is that the digital camera killed Kodak. But the thing is that if you remember back to, and we're old enough to remember this, if you remember back to the introduction of the digital camera, at first people were like, oh, that's cool, but what am I supposed to do with this? You know?
How am I going to hang a digital picture?
Exactly. People, it's a fun gadget.
Where am I going to put this?
Right. It's and you know what? It also, they sucked. Like the original digital photos sucked.
It was like half a megapixel.
Right. So you think of this idea now and you're like, oh my God, disruptive idea, totally obviously going to kill camera film, but that actually isn't what it was. You know what killed Kodak? The argument is Facebook. Because Facebook was the primary use case for digital photos. Facebook was the first time that people said, aha, I know what to do with this.
Yeah, I know where to put it and why.
And I see how when I put it there, people react to it. It's actually more fun. And wait a second, why do I have shoe boxes full of photos? I don't need them. I could just put them here.
Nobody can double tap this. Nobody can like it.
Exactly.
Nobody can share it unless I mail it out.
Exactly.
Make copies of my scrapbook.
So now you're Kodak. You have structured yourself to compete in one way, which is on faster, cheaper, better. And now Facebook comes along. How the hell do you compete against that? Right? You don't. Which was the problem. So you ask a question about, well, how can we build this in so that we can be constantly adaptive? And I think it's worth keeping in mind that story, because the problem here is that what we often do is we get comfortable and then we basically build systems around ourselves to reinforce our comfort. And that leaves us with no resources and no preparedness to react when something totally new comes along. So what do you do instead? Well, you have to do the exact opposite, which is that you have to start building in systems that, there's nothing wrong with efficiency. We should make things better, faster, and cheaper. That's how to compete. But while you're doing that, make sure that you're also creating the opportunity to explore and the awareness that the thing that you're doing at one point will have to change. It's not a question of whether it should. It will have to change.
Undoubtedly.
And when you go into it like that and you start to build structures in, and I tell you one quick way in which somebody did it that really stuck with me, but when you start to build that in, then you become prepared to react when it comes next.
Because you're kind of like building in, you don't know what, but you're building in reaction process.
Exactly.
I don't know what exactly I need to change or how I need to pivot, but I'm putting something in for a pivot.
So there's this guy named Kyle Hansloven, who is the founder and CEO of Huntress, which is a digital security company. Okay. And he asks himself, I love this, he asks himself at the end of every year whether his time is done. Is he done as CEO? Not because he's doing a bad job, but because the company is he the right person for now? Because the company is going to evolve. It evolves every year. Every company evolves, right? And we're talking about companies, but even individuals, right? Your needs, the things that people need from you are going to change. And so Kyle has set an expectation, not just for himself, but he does this in front of his entire team. Every year he asks himself, is this the end of the line for the CEO?
Well, he says it to himself and publicly, like he asks this question in front of his
He says it to himself. And then if the answer is yes, which so far it has, he has to make the case to the company. He sends out a note to his entire company making the case for why he should continue to be CEO.
What a great leader.
It's great. Wow. It's great leadership, isn't it? I love it. And the reason is because he's taking stock of what does this company need now? And am I the person to do it? And I said, Kyle, this is all well and good, but so far the answer has always been yes. Are you prepared for the answer to be no?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, because ultimately what I care about is not my own position at the company. It's the company. And I have to do, my job is to do what's best for it. And what's best for it at some time is going to be me changing roles. Doesn't mean that I have to leave, but I got to do something different.
Yeah.
And that's one small way that I think we could start thinking about just putting a marker in time, just forcing us to constantly say, okay, change is surrounding me and I need to adapt to it. And maybe that means that I need to change, or maybe that means that I need to shift.
I don't know why this pops in my head. Yeah. I think it's the same thing. Zombie apocalypse.
Sure.
Reminds me of, have you seen World War Z?
No.
World War Z, the Brad Pitt movie.
Yeah. I'm familiar with it. Yeah.
Zombie apocalypse. Well, spoiler alert for people out there. It's been out for way long. You should have seen it by now. There's this one kind of like safe space. I think it's in Jerusalem. And for some reason, the city has really just blocked off the attack. Long story short, they get in there, they have fortified walls, they're killing it. But what they did was they built in a contingency plan. So based on like the leaders of the country, the government, they had this rule to where if we ever unanimously agree on one approach to govern our city, whatever's in the best interest of our people, I think it was 12 people, the 12th man, one of them has to disagree. One of them has to, whatever everybody else is doing, this other guy has to build a plan, basically the complete opposite. So that if we're planning to defend, he needs to plan to go on the offense and vice versa. And that ultimately is what kind of like made them so safe and secure for such a long time, because he had built in this contingency. We think one thing's going to work, but just in case it doesn't, I'm going to do the opposite.
Yeah.
And it's like we need that in our own lives and especially in our business.
Right. That's totally true, because if you don't have that, then all you have when something unexpected comes along are terrible, dumb solutions. Have you ever heard of...
You're reacting. You're just reacting out of fear and panic and just in hope that throwing spaghetti against the wall is going to stick. Whereas maybe if you had a little bit of a plan before, you actually know what to do. You know at least the first step instead of just hoping to guess.
Have you ever heard of Gerber Singles?
No, what's that?
Gerber, the baby food company? Yeah. So Gerber, decades ago, was trying to figure out how to expand the business, right? They were, I don't know what they were thinking, but they were reacting to some kind of challenge in the marketplace. How do we expand our business? And they didn't know how to do anything else but make baby food. And so...
Is this where they built the college fund?
They started to release baby food for adults that they called Gerber Singles. And the idea is, the idea is, you're a single person at home. Have some baby food, right? Because
like mushy peas.
Because all Gerber could think of was, well, all we know how to do is make baby food. So why don't we just sell baby food to somebody else who isn't a baby? And it's like, guys,
it's also just called food.
It's not how it works. Yeah, it's not how it works. And the problem is, like, there's a company that hadn't built in that they didn't have that team whose job was to think of new opportunities, right? They had the team that was only thinking of the current opportunity. And then when they were trying to find new opportunities, the only thing that they had available was to find some stupid way to take the thing that they're doing and just like throw it at somebody else. Yeah. And that doesn't work. Yeah. That never works. And so
I take it Gerber Singles is not still around.
It was very short-lived. Yeah. Very, possibly a collector's item on eBay. I don't know. But they pulled them from the shelves really fast. So here's a way to think about how to approach this in your own life. I have, in my own career, followed this philosophy that I didn't know what I was doing at first, but I then kind of looked back and I realized, I'm doing this thing that works out really well for me, and I should perhaps formalize it in the way that I approach my work. Yeah. I call it work your next job. So here it goes. In front of you, in front of me, in front of everybody watching and listening, there are two sets of opportunities. Opportunity set A, opportunity set B. Opportunity set A is everything that is asked of you. So you go to a job, you got a boss, that boss demands things of you. You're supposed to be doing things, you're evaluated on things.
Responsibilities.
Exactly. Tasks, whatever, those are the things that when it comes to performance review time, you are going to be evaluated on. That's opportunity set A. Opportunity set B is everything available to you that nobody's asking you to do.
Like what?
Well, could be something at your job. So it could be joining a new team. It could be taking on some new responsibilities, but it also could be something at home. It could be that you like listening to podcasts and you thought to yourself, what would happen if I started my own podcast? I'll teach myself how to podcast. I'll figure out what all this cool equipment is in this room and how to use it. And my argument to you is that opportunity set B, doing things that are available to you that nobody is asking you to do, is always more important, infinitely more important. It's not to say opportunity set A is unimportant. It's not. You have to do a good job at your job or you're going to get fired and you need the money. But opportunity set B is where growth is going to happen. Because if you only focus on opportunity set A, then you're only going to be qualified to do the thing that you're already doing. And that doesn't lead you anywhere. And so when we think about, well, how do you create a resilience to change? A big part of the answer is that you should be constantly bringing new things in. You don't have to know where they're going to go. You don't have to know what the ROI, the return on investment, is for your time, for the things that you're going to do. Just pick things that you find compelling and that are going to push you in new directions. Because once you do that, you start to build out all of these other avenues that you didn't have before. This is the reason I'm sitting here with you right now, is because of opportunities set B. I mean, just to draw one line, although there are many of them, years and years ago, I was an editor at Fast Company. And my job, the title was senior editor. Fun fact, for people who aren't in media, is like senior editor sounds senior, but it's actually kind of like middle of the pack editor. So I was like, I was kind of in the middle of this, of the pecking order here. Yeah, that's exactly right. Right. And so I was hired to work on the print magazine. And while I was there, a video department started. And nobody asked me to join the video department, but it seemed like an interesting opportunity. And I thought, if I could get good on camera, I think something could come from that. I don't know what, but something couldn't hurt. Yeah. And so I raised my hand and I got in front of the camera, and the director of video thought, this guy's pretty good, could learn a few things, gave me some tips. And eventually I hosted 2 different video shows for them over the time that I was at Fast Company. Now, what was going to come from that? At the time I was like, I don't know, maybe I'll get a television show or something. I don't have a television show. But what it did do is it taught me a couple of really important things. It taught me to hold myself on camera. It taught me to talk like this, to be animated and engaging on a microphone.
Your inflection's great.
Thank you. I appreciate that. It's a lot of practice to do that. And so that was useful. Why was it useful? I don't know. I moved on to another job. People invited me to do things on stage. I did some things on stage. I went on TV a couple times to be on the news or whatever. And then I was interviewing to be editor-in-chief of Entrepreneur Magazine many years later, right? And one of the things that they really liked about me was that I could be a good representative of the brand. You could put me on TV, on camera, and I will represent this brand. It was a big selling point for me getting this job. And
he's camera ready, everybody.
Exactly, right? Here I am, right? I'll just show up in a t-shirt and make people deal with it. So I worked my next job without knowing what the next job was.
Wow.
You know what I mean?
Say that again, please.
I worked my next job without knowing what the next job was.
That is one of the most powerful pieces of advice I could ever hope to give to somebody, and I hope the person's picking up right now.
Yeah, because you can't know what it is. But I will tell you that if you don't prepare yourself for it, then you're never going to get it when the time comes.
Oh, God, I love that. It makes me think, kind of takes me back to my days when I was working my last job.
Yeah.
So many things fed into my level of awareness of being overworked and undervalued, which I think anybody in any working situation, that's going to begin to churn the wheels of, I don't know if I want to stay here. Am I doing the right thing? What other things could I accomplish? But, but also I was doing things, side hustles. I was scratching other itches. I was doing more things outside of what was asked of me in the job and outside of the job. What I mean by that, I've always been in the health and wellness space, as a health coach, as a trainer, online content here, talking about all ways of mind, body, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual wellness. And like when you tap into your bigger picture, when I tapped into what I can provide beyond just what is asked of me, it just, I mean, it never ends, but like in the best way possible.
Right.
And that is what I owe so much to my level of awareness, to intentionally side hustle my way out of my job, to intentionally under promise and over deliver, to intentionally go above and beyond for the person asking it of me, but also for myself.
Yeah.
And when I did that, it was just opportunity, 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 opportunity. But if we're not doing that, we're missing that.
Yeah.
We're cutting ourselves so short. So besides maybe this conversation right here, being that level of awareness for somebody, what questions would you recommend somebody to maybe regularly ask of themselves? You know, am I going above and beyond? Am I pushing the envelope professionally, pushing the envelope personally? Where can those two blend? Like, is it just a matter of keeping awareness, keeping questions flowing? Do we need to have certain timelines and benchmarks? Like, how can we really make sure that we're moving in a direction of expansion?
I'll tell you a story as a way to answer that. I started my career as a community newspaper reporter. I was working at the Gardner News in North Central Massachusetts, paper, 6,000 circulation. This was 2002. I don't know what it is now. Anyway, you know what I was writing about? Nothing, because nothing was happening at this, like just nothing, right? Like I was covering like middle school theater, you know, nothing was happening. And it was bruising. It was ego bruising.
Crushing your soul.
It really,
sure, yeah.
it was because I aspired to something bigger. I didn't know what it was, but I knew I could do
this ain't it.
Bigger. Yeah, this ain't it. But how am I going to get there? And I looked at it and I broke it down into these three questions, which is why I'm telling you this, to your question about questions. So I asked myself these three questions. What do I have? What do I need? What's available? Let me break it down with the answers. So what do I have? Well, I have a job that provides me with an opportunity to write, but not at a really high level. And I'm not surrounded by people who can help me get to the next level, because the people who are here for the same reason that I'm here, which is that we don't have the skills to work at the next level.
Do the thing, get the pay. Do the thing, get the pay. Yeah.
And I was not going to learn from the editor who was there, who just, I mean, frankly, wasn't very good at his job. And I loved my colleagues, but you know, we were all at the same level of experience. So, okay, that's what I have. What do I need? Well, what I need are people that I can learn from and the opportunities to reach beyond, to challenge myself. That's what I need. And I'm not going to get that at this job. So, okay, what's available? The answer is what's not available is just doors flinging open at the New York Times and the Washington Post, right? Like at no point is anybody from the New York Times going to call me up at the Gardner News and say, kid, loved that story about the middle school dance. Come on up, you're covering the White House, right? Like nobody was going to do that. So instead, the question is, what's available? What is available, right? Like not in a fantasy land, like what is available to me right now? Another job is not currently available. Mentors are not available, right? I didn't know anybody. I wasn't connected. And like emailing people and asking them to be your mentor is just a dead end. I don't know. Do you get that, by the way? Because I get that a fair amount.
What?
Hey, will you be my mentor?
Oh, sometimes.
Yeah. Like I get it a fair amount. Yeah. It's very interesting. I feel bad to say no, but you know, the answer is I don't have time. I'm sorry. Like people think that I think mentorship is like a job that you can find somebody to fulfill. It's not really how it works. So I didn't have anything. And then I realized I had something. Freelancing. So in my field, in media, if you flip through a magazine right now, those stories are generally written by two types of people. There are people on staff, and then there are freelancers. So freelancers they're functionally independent contractors. They're professional writers who generally have pitched an individual story idea to an editor. And then the editor says, I like that. Let's work on it together. Yeah. And then they write up a contract just for that one story. And then they do it. It's it's a very inefficient way of getting work, frankly, but it is what happens in this industry. And I thought, well, nobody's going to hire me, but maybe they'll take some of my ideas. If I have a singular idea, then I can pitch that idea to someone. And if they like it, I can work with them and I can learn from them. That's how I'm going to get ahead. And so that's what I did. I quit that job and I sat in my bedroom in Holden, Massachusetts, in the center of the state, literally next to a graveyard. It was literally next to a graveyard. Right, $500 a month I was paying to live next to a graveyard.
Incubator.
In my right. Or just like looking upon my career in the graveyard, and I started a cold pitch. And I cold pitched everybody, just random magazines, and eventually I got a story in the Washington Post. It took a lot of work.
Oh, amazing!
I got this Susan Morris, this editor at the time, wrote me back. She said, "This is interesting. Let's hop on the phone." This story that I pitched her. We got on the phone. I was nervous. My mouth was dry. I was pacing in this dumpy apartment. And she's asking me questions about the story and my qualifications to write it. And at the end, she said, I'm not ready to say yes, but I'm not ready to say no. So if you want to do some more work and come back to me, that's fine.
Hey, that's amazing.
That's all I need.
Wow, yeah.
All I need. So I busted my ass. I tracked down like 15 people to interview for this story. I sent her a 3,000 word outline, which was like double the length of the story itself. And then she said yes, right? And then I got to learn from Susan and I got to write for those publications. And once I got a story in the Washington Post, other people took me seriously. And again, it all goes back to these three very simple questions. You just have to answer as honestly as possible. What do I have? What do I need? And what's available?
You made me think of something there, that last part of your story. You mentioned how you got to be mentored by this editor. Right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's another thing, another way to look at where we're at, what we have and what we want. Mm-hmm. Maybe we aren't clear exactly on what we want, but we are clear on who we think can help us get it. And by that, I mean, not like climbing the ladder or riding in on someone's curtails, but like, I really respect this person. Mm-hmm. I would love to be in the same room, in the same field, in the same space as this author, publisher, editor, podcaster, YouTuber, CEO, whatever. Right. So what maybe problem do they have right now that I can solve?
Yes.
What can I do to just get on their radar and then do the work?
Thank you for saying that, because the most important thing that you just said there is you think to yourself, what problem can I solve for that person? So many people focus on and lead with what they want.
Yeah. Ooh.
And that doesn't get you anywhere. It just doesn't. I get it all the time. I mean, like,
you can smell it a mile away. I
run a national magazine, right?
A pretty big one.
A pretty big one, yeah. And people pitch me all the time. And I will tell you, like, one of the most common things that people ask when they email me, and the way they ask it, is they'll say something like, how can I get a feature in your magazine? It would really help my business.
No shit.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Right. And it's
Get
like,
in line.
Here's what I'm hearing. I would like to order a hamburger. How much is the hamburger, right? They're treating me like a service provider. Like, my job is to provide value to you, but my job isn't to provide value to you, right? The person who is pitching me. My job is to provide value to my audience.
To the plural you.
That's right. That's my job, right? So when you approach me, what you have to understand is that my way of thinking isn't how can I best provide a service to the person who wants to appear in the magazine. My thinking is, I want to tell my audience valuable information. So do you have valuable information for my audience, right? And telling me, how do I get a feature in your magazine? It would really help my business, is not valuable information for my audience, right? So now you're not leading with any value for me. The more that you understand, when you're a person reaching out to anybody about anything, the more that you understand what it is that they need, and you're able to provide that value to them, you basically do their work for them.
100%. Yeah.
That's when you get ahead. Think of it like this, simple as could be. Don't ask for an opportunity, be the opportunity.
Ooh, yeah. It also makes me think of a little technique that I have when I'm looking for a certain type of guest or a certain guest.
Yeah.
Besides, maybe the pitches that I get all the time.
Sure.
Same thing. It's like, hey, you got a great show. I would love to be on it. Like,
cool.
Yeah. It's, it's when I'm looking for, really it's things, people, processes that are influencing my life, giving me value. And then, when I find the person or persons that are killing it in that or have a lot of experience or just like are the people that I want, I'm curious, does this work for you? Like getting on the radar. It's like, I know I don't want to cold pitch. I don't want to just like come out of the blue and be like, hey, sure, cool, maybe you're helping me with something, but you never heard of me from Adam before.
Right.
So I like to get on their radar.
Yeah.
I like to get to know them, and by quite literally just following on social media, commenting, subscribing to their newsletter.
Perfect.
Getting on their radar in small little ways so that when I actually have an opportunity to present something or be like, I would love to have you on the show, or I see you're in LA, I would love to get coffee, whatever.
Yeah.
Is that as efficient, or should we be looking for, hey, I solved this problem for you? Fingers crossed, I get it.
So I think what you're describing is perfect, because what you're doing is thinking about the other person as a human being, not as a machine that spits out value.
Not
right?
just transactional.
It's not just transactional. And look, it's funny because we talk about we want to build connections and relationships. Not everything is transactional, but of course, things are transactional, and that's fine. Most of the stories,
business, it's going to be eventually. Yeah.
And most of the stories that run in Entrepreneur Magazine, for example, didn't come out of some long, wonderful gestation of a relationship. Oftentimes, people reached out and they told us a story, and we found it interesting, and we decided to put it in the magazine. So you don't have to do what you're describing, but I think that for many people, it's a very good strategy, and it worked. I mean, I will tell you that it works on me in that there are a lot of people who follow me on social media, and they will comment on my stuff, and they'll subscribe to the newsletter, and they'll respond. And that just makes me aware of their name, and it makes me, I don't know, I like people who pay attention to me.
It's an imprint, no matter how small.
It's an imprint.
It's quite literally neurophysiologically, it's an imprint on that person's psyche.
That's right. And so when they reach out to me and they pitch, doesn't mean that I'm going to say yes.
Right. Yeah.
Does mean I'm going to pay attention. Yeah. Because now, they've imprinted, they have become a familiar entity to me. And I feel like because they spent time on me, I have to spend time on them. I owe it to them to spend time on them. And I think that that's wonderful. I think that's great. It's not the only way that you could do things. Another way that you could do it is you could deeply understand the way that somebody works and the thing that they're doing, and then just reach out to them. I have people who reach out all the time, and they've clearly read the magazine, and they understand, for example, that one of the things that we love at Entrepreneur is we love counterintuitive solutions. Like
what?
Well, okay. So a couple of years ago, this woman named Joelle reached out to me about a butter dish that she has called Buttery. And here's the thing about
an actual dish for butter.
Is an actual dish for butter. Yep. Just very basic. Here's the thing. Don't know if you know this, but you don't have to refrigerate your butter. You can leave it out. And in fact, pretty nice if you leave it out, because then it's nice and spreadable. Problem is, though, of course, that with butter that's left out, it's very soft. And so if you have a butter dish that you like lift up in the thing, it can bang against the butter and make a big mess. So she had invented a butter dish on a hinge, goes up and down, and therefore never bumps into the butter. Very, very smart. Now, great idea.
It's so genius.
Yeah, it's simple, it's wonderful. It's not for us as a story, because we're not Butter Dish Monthly.
She should throw it on Shark Tank or something.
But she should totally throw it on Shark Tank. And so she had pitched us that. Now, that by itself, I would have not been all that interested in. But then she tells me this story. And here's the story. She tells me that when she is developing Buttery, she wonders, what are people willing to pay for this? And what colors do they want it in? Basic market research stuff. And so she thinks, well, I got to go out and do some market research. So she goes to a company that does market research, and she says, how much for you to answer some questions about Buttery, or, go out and interview people and find out about it. And they say $10,000. What does she not have?
$10,000.
$10,000. And so she's thinking, well, how do I do this?
Yeah.
And then one day she is waiting for a flight at an airport, and she's looking around, and she realizes airports are full of people who have absolutely nothing better to do than answer questions about butter dishes. Nothing better to do, right?
Literally just killing time.
Just killing time. They're just sitting there. And
wow, I love this innovation.
Get this. It's so smart. You start at gate 1. By the time you're at gate 10, everyone at gate 1, brand new.
You've got so many ages, races, sexes, demographics, nationalities.
Exactly. You have the perfect mix.
Wow.
You could do it all day. Wow. You have a flight at 5 p.m., show up at 8 a.m. Nobody's going to stop you. You're in there all day.
I'm going to go ahead and apologize to everyone I see at LAX next time for hours in advance when I'm getting market research for my next whatever.
Right. It's so smart, right? And then she figures out how to do it because if she goes up and she's like, I have invented a butter dish, then people are going to be like, oh, well, that's so sweet. And they're going to, but if she goes up and she says, hi, I'm doing market research on this butter dish, then people are going to give her some honest answers. And so this is how she does her market research for Buttery at the airport. It's so smart. And anyway, the reason why I love this story is because of exactly what happened when I told you it, which is that you're not in the butter dish industry, but as soon as I told you the punchline of the story, you thought, I see how that kind of thinking is useful to me.
I got an application.
Right. Yeah. I see it. And that's what I love. That's what I want. So when an entrepreneur reaches out to me and they tell me a story that I can immediately see as being of value to then they have provided me value because now I get to pass this story along to other people. And that's really useful. So that's the difference. It's the difference between reaching out and saying, hey, I would like something and saying, hey, I understand exactly what you're looking for and here it is.
That's a fantastic story. Man, it makes me think. It makes me really want to think much harder about any future question I ask of myself for my business and any other future question I would ever pitch to somebody about my business.
And once you start to think of that granularly, it really shifts the way that you approach just about everything. It's funny. I made this one little switch recently, which is people, when they would write me and they would say, you just DM on social media or something, and they would say, hey, I really liked that article that you did, or I really liked that podcast or whatever. I used to say, I'm really glad you enjoyed it.
Yeah.
But I was thinking about it and I was realizing, enjoyment isn't the reason that people come to me. Because generally the reason why people pay attention to my work is because they're trying to do something for themselves, right? And so what they're looking for are insights that can help them. That's not enjoyment. I don't make Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones is for enjoyment, right? But what I'm doing is I should be offering value, right? I love Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones didn't really provide me a lot of value in my life.
It's not the last season,
right? Right. Although I thought that the White Walkers battle was awesome.
Oh yeah,
so
yeah. That was pretty
fight
dope,
me on that. But the otherwise, I have to be value forward. If I'm not providing value to people, then I have no purpose in their lives. So I made this shift, which is that whenever somebody says, hey, I really liked that thing, I always respond and I either say, I'm glad you find it valuable or I'm glad you found it useful. And I really like that because every time that I do that, I remind myself that all of my work has to be valuable and useful. Enjoyment is not the bar for me. It can't be. Yeah. Right. And so once you start to program in just these little things that you do during the day, I don't know that it matters to the individual person who got that message and they're like, oh, well, I guess it is valuable. Right. But the point is that it's a constant reminder to me. And that's really useful because then the next time that I sit down to work on something, I have to think, how valuable is this going to be? Because if I don't understand how it's going to be valuable, then I'm not sure I should do it.
Asking these types of questions, I think, is the crux of how we are ever going to get out of our own way sometimes in life, but damn sure in business. And, oddly enough, actually, Michael Brandt, he's been on the show before. He's a co-founder here of HVMN. They make this product I'm holding here in the video. And him and his team hosted a dinner. I went to one recently. Some other friends of mine went to one a couple months ago. And they're in the athletic apparel and athletic event space. Shout out Painkiller. Yeah. And they told me that he posed this question to them that has been weeks and weeks and weeks. They've still been mulling over. He goes, what's it going to take to get you to $1 billion company? And he just stood there. He's like, I've never thought about that.
Yeah.
What questions, because I know you've got this incredible book coming out now.
Yeah.
A question like that. What is the $1 billion question that you have that you want to ask you want entrepreneurs to ask of themselves to completely flip their world upside down, but in the best way possible?
I really appreciate that. Yeah. So this question is so simple, but so important. I literally dedicated a whole page to it in the book. And what I mean by page is it's a blank page and it just says this so that people can tear it out and hang it on their wall. So the book is Build for Tomorrow. The question is, what is it for? What is it for? Let me give you an application for what is it for. People ask me a lot. So I go and I'll talk at events, and people have me as a speaker, and I go and I talk about the value of change, seeing change as opportunity, and then inevitably somebody in the audience afterwards will raise their hand and they'll say, okay, you just talked about the value of embracing change. You run a print magazine. That sounds pretty old. So what are your thoughts there? And the first couple times people asked me that, I was taken aback. And then I started to think,
all, rude,
but I like it. I think it's good. Look, if somebody's going to stand up and like basically tell you, here's a way you should think, then I think that it's worth raising hands and being like, can I just press against your argument a little bit? I think that that's really good. As a guy who has is in the business of asking people like challenging questions, I respect it. Like, throw it at me, right?
It's like we want that guy in the audience from was it Happy Gilmore? Like, you suck. Yeah. we need that heckler. We should hope to have that heckler.
That's right. You need it. Right? Because do you remember the old the old Beavis and Butthead bit where they were like how the question was like, how do we have great things? And the answer is because some things have to suck.
True. Right? Yeah, some things are great because other things suck.
Right. Yeah. Like, you have to have both.
Better than, absolutely.
Right. So people ask me this question, and I thought, so I started to think, okay, what is the print magazine for? What is this for? And then I started to ask, what is content for? And I realized, if I asked that question a couple decades ago, content was for something very, very simple. Content was for monetization. There were two very easy ways to monetize content. You could run ads against it, and you could sell subscriptions to it. Both fantastic, easy ways to make money if you're in the content game in a time in which it's easy to monetize content. Today, much harder to monetize content. All right? And I'm not just talking about Entrepreneur Magazine. I'm talking about literally every magazine, every website, everything. Hard to monetize content. Why? Well, because Google and Meta have gobbled up the majority of the advertising market, and because people are not in the habit of paying for subscriptions to content anymore. They get enough of it for free. So you think to yourself, well, okay, if content is not for monetization, what is it for? Go back to my question. What is it for? Most important question you can ask about anything that you do. What is it for? Well, okay. If content isn't for monetization, is it for something? Yes, it seems to be. Content is for relationships. Because once you develop a relationship through the content, then you can provide additional value that is monetized. You can sell people products and services that they will trust you to buy because of the content. You look at Red Bull, right? Red Bull is your one-stop shop if you're interested in extreme sports. They make a website and a magazine and videos and events and everything. Does Red Bull make its money off of content? Are they a content company?
They probably lose a shit ton of money off
Probably lose a shit ton of money.
Yeah, shit ton.
That thing's got to be right. Like they're right. They're like when their athletes jump out of an airplane, so does like $1 billion just floating to right. It's just
might get a little back on the Google AdSense on the YouTube video, exactly.
Right?
Not to cover the rocket ship to get you up to the stratosphere.
Right. Total waste of money. But because of all that stuff, people buy their energy drinks, and their energy drinks make a lot of money. Probably really good margins on those energy drinks. That's the reason why they make the content. And so once you ask, well, what is content for? And you really, really take seriously the answer to that question, then at that point, it gives you a direction to go in for what I'm doing. So like, myself, I make a lot of content. I mean, so I'm at Entrepreneur, but then I also make, you have
a podcast.
I do a ton of stuff, right? A podcast, a book, a newsletter. I make a lot of stuff, and I don't even attempt to monetize the majority of it. And the reason is because it's such a good relationship builder. And people like me and trust me and feel like they know me. And as a result, I know that when I have something that I really do want to monetize, they're going to buy it. That's a way to think about it. So now take that question and apply it to literally everything that you do. What is it for? Because the answer is going to change, which is the reason to keep asking it. Ask it yesterday and ask it tomorrow, because at some point, what is it for is going to change. So, what you started a podcast. What is that for? You've been networking and you developed this relationship. What is that relationship for? What is it for? Because it has to be for something. And if you don't know the answer, it's possibly for nothing. And then that is time and energy you could put somewhere else.
I'll say it again. My audience has probably heard of me beating this dead horse, but the thing is never the thing.
Yeah.
Case in point here, being the CEO of Entrepreneur Magazine.
Editor-in-chief.
Editor-in-chief.
I don't want to take my CEO's job.
I'm sure you'll appreciate this. I mean, just when I reflect back on my entrepreneur journey, so many times, whether besides the pandemic or like a hard thing that came before me and I had to pivot, every other opportunity that came was when I realized that what I'm doing is actually creating so many other things.
Yeah.
The podcast for the first 2-3 years was creating a know, like, and trust relationship with my audience that fed into my online coaching business. They were listening to me for a month, a year, and had this level of trust in me. Like, Chase, I want to learn more with you about my health, my business, whatever. Everforward coach, ran that for years.
Yeah.
Outside of that, being the guy I was sharing with you earlier about, the podcast production company, being the guy who had started podcasting a little bit sooner before everybody else. Hey, how do you do that? Another light bulb, podcast production company.
Perfect.
And then, the networking thing, I'll stay true to this form of content, podcasting. Having someone like yourself right here in front of me for 55 minutes now, how valuable is your time?
People pay actual money for it.
Yeah. And now here I am, so graciously having you on the show to talk about you, but to deliver value to my audience. It's this incredible exchange that I'm so grateful for. But you are you and nobody's like you, but the guests that have come on the show over the years then open up other opportunities.
Of course.
Like personal fulfillment and joy that I could never hope to imagine to receive. Opportunities, invitations, collaborations. I've sat in billionaires' houses just to be on the fly on the wall for what they do, all because we had this.
Yeah.
And I mean, and I say all this not to boast about my experience, but just to show what is possible when we make a commitment, we ask these hard questions, and then we reflect back on the thing that I'm doing. Am I over-delivering? Am I expanding? But also what else is available outside of that? The thing is never the thing. And the more I try to stay latched onto, especially in an identity aspect, like I am Chase the coach, I am Chase the podcaster, I was limiting myself so much.
Yeah.
And then instead, when I just kept focusing on, all right, well, expand, got to maintain certain variables, of course, but like it never stops.
Yeah.
It never stops in terms of opportunity, success, and fulfillment.
So what you described, I like to think of as the zigzag payoff, which is to say you do a thing and you don't exactly know where it's going to lead, but it's going to lead somewhere, right? And then because it's led somewhere, you now have a new opportunity that's going to lead somewhere else. Your listeners know how your podcast has led to other opportunities, but let's start from scratch with somebody else. Somebody decides to launch a podcast because maybe they like your podcast, but they don't want to do exactly what you do. They're actually kind of a comedy person. And so maybe they decide to launch a comedy podcast. And let's be honest, it's not a very good comedy podcast because most comedy podcasts are pretty bad.
It's funny because how bad it is.
Yeah, exactly. It's a bad comedy podcast, right? We've all heard them.
Been to some of those stand-ups.
Oh, it's brutal. So you launch a bad comedy podcast. Let's ask the question. Well, what is it for? Maybe we don't know at the time, but I would say, let's say I'll put myself in this. I'm the bad comedy podcaster, and I ask, what is it for? And the answer is, well, it's for creative satisfaction. Plenty to say for that. But also, I'm kind of learning some interesting stuff here. I'm learning about recording, and I'm learning distribution, digital file distribution. And now, let's say that a friend of mine who has a band comes along, and they're like, "Hey, we'd like to record a demo. You have some recording equipment. You know how to use it, right?" And I say, "Yeah, I do." Yeah. And so they come in, and I record, and my friends are happy, and they tell their friends, and now some more people are calling me, and they want demos. And eventually, I say, "Well, you know what? I should probably go start working in a studio." So I work in a studio, and I got these clients who are coming in, and they're recording things. And eventually, I'm too big for this studio, and I said, "Why don't I start my own studio?" And so now I got to start my own studio, and now I got all these clients, and I got a whole different career that I defined because I started a bad comedy podcast. Mm-hmm. And that's the zigzag payoff, which is to say that when you look back on it at the end, it makes sense. You can see how one thing led to the other, but at the time it doesn't make any sense at all, right? But you would only get to the end if you started at the beginning. And that's the reason why it's worth just kind of pushing and then constantly stepping back and reevaluating, saying, what is this for? Is this for something? Do I have an answer? Is this for my podcast, for example? I have this podcast also called Build for Tomorrow, just like the book. It's I'll be honest with you, it doesn't make me a ton of money. What is it for? Well, it's not for it's not for paying the bills. But I'll tell you what it is for. It's for two things. This is what I've come to. It's an IP factory, intellectual property, right? Which is to say that it is forcing me to do really interesting research, talk to really interesting people, draw out really fascinating stories and insights.
It's very well done, by the way.
Thank you.
I've listened to several episodes.
I appreciate that.
Very well done.
And I use that material in all sorts of other ways. So because I did an episode about how nostalgia works, I now understand how our memories function, and then I can use that when I'm talking to. Not long ago, I was talking to. I've been hired to come and talk to an executive team at a corporation that you have definitely heard of that's going through a lot of changes, and their head of HR had told me, there's a lot of people who feel nostalgic for the ways things used to be here, and I think it would be great if you could address that. And I was like, I know exactly how to address that. And so when I got up,
you probably did a podcast about it.
I said, well, yeah. I said, look, I want to tell you how your memory works, because it's going to challenge the way that you're feeling, because I know that you're feeling nostalgic about it. And then I told them this whole thing, and people really loved it. Now, that is the only reason I had that information was because I was forced to do it for the podcast. So it's an IP factory. And then number two, it's an opportunity magnet. People find the podcast, and then they reach out to me with interesting opportunities or just connections. I mean, some of the largest venture capitalists in the country like this show, and they reach out to me, and this is just useful contacts, right? Because I make the show. So the show does not make me that much money at all, but it provides these two things. And I always step back and ask, what is this for? What is this for? And maybe at some point the answer is, you know what, this isn't for anything anymore. And then it's time to shut it down. But for now I have the answer. That's why you keep asking the question.
Oh, damn, man. Well, having casually glanced at my watch, looking at our time, I could definitely sit here so much longer with you, but I want to honor your time. And
this has been so fun.
So much enjoyment on mine as well. Thank you so much. And congratulations on the book.
Thank you.
We're going to have all of that linked down in the show notes for everybody, video notes, check it out. But I have one final question for you.
Please.
And it's one that brings it home for me and the brand and the theme. And you've definitely hit on it in a very unique way, as does every guest. Ever forward. Mm-hmm. Living a life ever forward is becoming aware of all these ways that we tick, that we are in maintenance, we're succeeding, maybe we're dropping the ball. How can we just take a step forward and move forward in life today? When you hear those two words, what do they mean to you? How do you live a life ever forward?
I have gone through a lot of change in my life. I have reinvented my career a number of times. I have thought differently about what it is that I want to do and who I am in relation to other people. And each one of those changes feels really scary. And now I realize that if you were to catch yourself in one of those changes, you're going through one right now, I'm sure. Everyone is, right? It's impossible not to. Pick some forcing function. It could be the economy or whatever became of the pandemic for you or whatever. Like, you're going through something, and I think that it's just so valuable for all of us if we can think about the cycle of change that we're in right now as the conscious cycle, which is to say, this is the one that you pay attention to, that you take notes on, that you have documented evidence, literally written down or just in your head, so that when you get through it, when you get to, I believe in, this is in the book, I believe that change happens in 4 phases: panic, adaptation, new normal, and wouldn't go back. Get to wouldn't go back, that moment where you say, I have something so new and valuable that I wouldn't want to go back to a time before I had it. You will get there. Every cycle of change has it. And the scary thing about reaching wouldn't go back is that then you become protective of your new wouldn't go back moment, so that when change comes again, you get right back to panic. Yeah. So if you can treat the moment that you're in, the cycle that you're in, as a conscious cycle, which is to say that you're aware of it, then next time you go through it, you can look back and you can say, oh, I felt the same way. Oh, I did the same kinds of things. And it ultimately worked out. And that means it's going to work out again. And that helps you get through those early phases of panic. It helps you adapt faster and find a new normal and get to your wouldn't go back. And so that is the answer for me, which is that I want to be aware for myself, and I think that others should be too, to catch yourself in these moments where you're facing something that's really scary. Yeah. And you say, I'm going to remember this for next time because it's going to work out now, which means it'll work out again.
Oh, I really hope people take that to heart, because it's easier when today was a great day. We crushed it at work, made the sale, got the promotion. He said yes, she said yes, whatever. And we remember those moments. Right. Subconsciously, I think they're imprinted on us more rapidly, more deeply. When we have a negative moment, or what we perceive to be a negative moment, subconsciously we become detached. Our body wants us to stay safe, so it works against us in that way to not leave as quick or as deep of an imprint. But the consciousness part, if we chose to, I'm going to remember this. I'm going to know how I feel, where I feel it, the ripple effect, because I guarantee you if it's something undesired, it is extending beyond you in your relationship, in your health, in your business. And I'm going to take note of me and all these things. And that way, if and when this sensation comes up again, I've got a trigger, because I will immediately know what is going on. Yeah. But I will also know, last time this happened, my spouse and I didn't speak for a week. Last time this happened, my coworkers were on edge. Just go down the rabbit hole there. But I really hope the listeners pick up on that. Yeah. Now's the time. You can capture it now and be emboldened in the future. Whew. Well, my pleasure. Thank you again so much for being here. Thank you. This was such a blast. Such a great interview. And congrats again on the book. And I mean, what you all do at Entrepreneur, I'm always tuning into. So the value is there. Please don't stop. Hey, thank you. I appreciate it. And congratulations on everything you've built. It's really awesome.